I was 34 when I found out my family's secret nickname for me. Burden. That's what they called me behind my back. My name is Rachel Winters, and I'm 41 now, but I still remember the exact moment I discovered the truth. It was at my mother's funeral reception. I was in her bedroom, looking for a photo album to show my cousin, when I overheard my father and brother talking in the hallway outside. "At least with Mom gone, you won't have to deal with the burden alone anymore," my brother said. My father sighed. "Rachel's always been the burden in this family. Your mother just handled it better than most." I froze, my hand still on the bookshelf. The burden? Me? I pressed my back against the wall, suddenly desperate to hear more, but terrified of what might come next. Remember when we were kids and Mom would say she was taking care of the burden whenever she had to deal with Rachel's problems? My brother laughed. God, that nickname stuck forever. I slid down to the floor, my black funeral dress bunching around my knees. The burden. All those times I thought my mother was helping me, supporting me, loving me. She was just taking care of the burden. A family joke I wasn't in on for 34 years. I always knew I was different from my older brother, Jason. He was the golden child, captain of the football team, straight-A student, now a successful architect with a perfect family. I was the sensitive one, the one who needed more attention, more reassurance. I struggled with anxiety since childhood, but a burden, their burden? Growing up in our suburban Chicago home, I always felt like I was trying harder than everyone else just to be normal. My mother would smile tightly whenever I'd have a panic attack before school. "Deep breaths, Rachel. You're making us late again." I thought it was just impatience. I never realized it was contempt. There were signs looking back. When I was 12, I overheard my mother on the phone with her sister. "No, we can't make it this weekend. We've got the usual Rachel situation." Her voice had that tone, exasperated, put upon. I remember asking her later what she meant, and she just patted my head. "Nothing, sweetie. Adult stuff." Adult stuff, more like how to manage the family burden stuff. My father was more obvious with his frustration. When I needed help with homework, he'd sigh before sitting down with me. "Jason never needed this much explanation," he'd say, tapping his pen impatiently on the table. When I made the dance team in high school, the one achievement I was truly proud of, his response was, "Well, that's going to be a lot of driving for your mother." The summer after my junior year, I had my first major depressive episode. I couldn't get out of bed for days. My parents took me to a doctor who prescribed medication. But at home, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken resentment. One night, I heard them arguing. "This is getting ridiculous," my father said. "Jason never put us through anything like this." "She can't help it, David," my mother replied, but her voice was tired, defeated. "Can't she, though? Sometimes I think she just likes the attention." I pulled my pillow over my head that night and cried until my eyes swelled shut. I promised myself I'd try harder to be normal, whatever that meant. College was my escape. I went to Northwestern, just far enough from home to breathe, but close enough to visit. I studied psychology, partly to understand myself better. I made friends who didn't see me as a problem to be solved. For 4 years, I felt almost unburdened. Then came graduation, and the real world hit me hard. I struggled to find work in my field. The economy was bad, and entry-level psychology positions were scarce. After 6 months of searching, I moved back home, temporarily. Temporary stretched into a year. My father would leave job listings on the kitchen counter every morning. My mother would ask daily if I'd had any interviews. The word burden was never spoken to my face, but I felt it in every interaction. "Rachel, your brother was financially independent at 22, my father would remind me over dinner. "Jason never had trouble finding work," my mother would add, as if I needed the comparison. When I finally found a job at a community mental health clinic, the pay was barely enough to cover an apartment. My parents suggested I stay home to save money. I now realize they wanted to keep an eye on me, to manage the burden. At 26, I met Mark. He was kind, patient, and seemed to genuinely enjoy my company. When he proposed after 2 years of dating, my parents were ecstatic. Not for my happiness, I realized later, but because someone else was taking over their responsibility. At our wedding reception, my father's toast still haunts me. "Mark, you're a brave man. Rachel needs special handling sometimes, but she's worth it. The room laughed. I laughed too, not understanding I was the joke. Mark and I settled in a small house about 30 minutes from my parents. Close enough for Sunday dinners, far enough for breathing room. For a while, things were good. I was working as a counselor at a high school. Mark was advancing in his engineering career, and we were talking about starting a family. Then I had a miscarriage. It was early, only 8 weeks, but it devastated me. I sank into depression again. Mark tried to be supportive, but he wasn't equipped for this version of me. One night, after I'd spent the entire day in bed, he called my mother. The next morning, she was at our door. "I'm here to help," she said, but her eyes said something different. They said, "The burden is acting up again." She stayed for a week, cooking and cleaning while I recovered. I was grateful, truly, but one evening I overheard her on the phone with my father. "It's the same old Rachel drama," she said quietly. "Mark seems overwhelmed. I told you this would happen eventually." My father's response was loud enough that I could hear it through the phone. "He married her. The burden is his now." I retreated to the bathroom and sat on the edge of the tub, staring at my reflection in the mirror. Was that all I was to them? A burden to be passed from one caretaker to another. When my mother left, things with Mark were strained. He started working later, coming home after I was asleep. When he was home, he was distant, checking his phone constantly. I knew something was wrong, but I was afraid to confront it, afraid to be even more of a burden. 3 months after the miscarriage, I found the text. Mark was having an affair with a colleague. When I confronted him, his defense broke my heart more than the betrayal. "You have no idea what it's like being married to you, Rachel," he said, his voice cold. "It's exhausting. I'm always waiting for the next breakdown, the next crisis. I needed someone who doesn't drain me." Drain, burden, different words, same meaning. I moved out the next day, back to my parents' house at 30 years old. A failure in their eyes, the burden had returned home. My mother set me up in my old bedroom, which she'd kept largely the same since high school. Dance trophies still lined the shelves, alongside stuffed animals and teen magazines. It was like a museum to a version of myself that never quite grew up in their eyes. "You can stay as long as you need," my mother said, but her tight smile told a different story. That night, I heard them arguing downstairs. "I thought we were done with this," my father said. "Mark was supposed to be the solution." "She's our daughter, David," my mother replied, but even her defense sounded weary. "She's 30 years old, Caroline. When does it end? When does it end?" I asked myself the same question as I stared at the glow-in-the-dark stars on my ceiling, the ones I'd put up when I was 12. I found a therapist and started the divorce proceedings. I applied for jobs further away, determined to escape. My parents watched with skeptical eyes, clearly expecting another failure. When I was offered a position at a school district in Denver, their surprise was palpable. "Colorado, that's so far," my mother said. "That's the point," I replied. And for once, I didn't apologize for my honesty. I moved to Denver and slowly rebuilt my life. I made new friends who knew nothing about my history, nothing about the burden I supposedly was. I thrived in my new job, eventually becoming the district coordinator for mental health services. I dated occasionally but kept my walls high. For 4 years, I maintained minimal contact with my family. Holiday calls, birthday cards, the occasional update email. It was easier that way. Distance was my protection. Then my mother was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer. Despite everything, I flew home immediately. She had 6 months, maybe less. Whatever our issues, she was still my mother. Those 6 months were a strange time, as she weakened. Our relationship shifted. She became more honest, less guarded. One afternoon, as I was helping her sort through old photographs, she paused over one of me at my dance recital. "You were always so beautiful when you danced," she said softly. "So free." I looked at her, surprised by the genuine warmth in her voice. "I didn't think you noticed." She put the photo down. "I noticed everything about you, Rachel, maybe too much." It was the closest we ever came to acknowledging the dynamic between us. Not an apology, not really, but something like recognition. When she died, I was holding her hand. My father and brother were there too, but it was me she looked at in those final moments. Me she squeezed back. And then came the funeral reception and the conversation I was never meant to hear. The burden. Their secret name for me all these years. After overhearing my father and brother, I stayed hidden in my mother's bedroom for nearly an hour, the photo album forgotten in my lap. When I finally emerged, my face was composed, my eyes dry. I smiled at relatives, accepted condolences, played my part. That night, after everyone had gone, I confronted my father. We were alone in the kitchen, him with his whiskey, me with untouched tea. "I heard you and Jason talking earlier," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "About your nickname for me." His face registered shock, then embarrassment, but not denial. "Never denial. Rachel, you have to understand." "No," I interrupted. "I don't have to understand anything. I just needed to know if it was real, and now I do." "You've always been more challenging than your brother," he said, as if that explained everything. Challenging, difficult, burden. I listed the words flatly. "Do you have any idea what it's like to grow up feeling like you're too much for the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally?" He looked down at his glass. "We did our best." "Your best was making me feel like my existence was an imposition," I said. "And the worst part, I believed it. I've spent my entire life trying to be smaller, quieter, less needy, less me." "That's not fair," he protested weakly. "No, it's not," I agreed. "None of this is fair." I left the next morning, back to Denver, back to the life I'd built for myself. But something had shifted inside me. The revelation of the nickname wasn't just a wound. It was clarifying. All those years of feeling like I was too much, too sensitive, too needy. It wasn't me, it was them, their limitations, not mine. 6 months after my mother's funeral, my father called to tell me he was selling the house. He asked if I wanted anything from my old room before he cleared it out. "No," I said. "There's nothing there I need." There was a long pause. "Rachel, about what you overheard. That nickname. It was wrong of us." It wasn't quite an apology, but it was something. "Yes," I said. "It was." Another pause. "You seem different now." I laughed. A genuine laugh. "I am different. I finally stopped believing I was a burden. 2 years have passed since then. I'm still in Denver, still single, still building my career. My relationship with my father is cautious but evolving. He visited once, awkwardly navigating my world instead of me navigating his. My brother and I rarely speak. Some wounds are too deep for easy healing. Last week, I was cleaning out my desk at work and found an old journal from my therapy sessions right after the divorce. On the first page, I'd written, "How do you stop being a burden when that's all you've ever been told you are?" I traced the desperate words with my finger, feeling a surge of compassion for that earlier version of myself. The woman who believed her family's narrative, the woman who thought her sensitivity was a flaw, not a strength. I tore out the page, crumpled it, and threw it away. Then I wrote something new on the first page. "The weight I carry now is only mine, chosen, not assigned." Sometimes I wonder if my mother regretted the nickname in her final days. If that's why she looked at me the way she did at the end, I'll never know. But I've stopped needing to know. The truth is, we all carry burdens. The difference is whether we're carrying our own or the ones other people have placed on us without our consent. For 34 years, I carried their definition of me. Now I carry only my own, and it feels lighter, so much lighter.